Alright everyone, the Gang of Four once again with their left-wing newspeak mythologies. This time it's not AOC though, or Elon Omar spinning some diatribe about Islamophobia. It's Ayanna Pressley. She's sort of the odd one out of the gang. Really, AOC and Elon Omar are sort of at the forefront, and Rashida Tlaib and Ayanna Pressley are typically a little bit more in the background. But now she's talking about food apartheid systems. And the idea is that there's like a deep racial basis in disparities as far as like wholesome food availability. I'm thinking to myself, there's a much easier explanation than, nobody wants to sell salad to this black community. Here's the thing. And part of this is my understanding as a person who was raised in poverty in small-town America. And by the way, Pressley, she wasn't born into wealth like some of the squad members were. We won't name names, although she's doing well now. Not everyone has the money for a $20 latte in the morning and their $50 like beetroot and goat cheese salad. Not everyone can afford the $15 martini lunch. A lot of people, like me for the first 27 years of my life roughly, are poor in the United States. Race has nothing to do with it. If you go to West Virginia, parts of rural Pennsylvania, maybe the parts of Ohio and so forth, you're going to find a huge amount of poverty that's overwhelmingly white. Literal barefoot and in the kitchen style poverty on the same order you'd find in like a corrupt village in Eastern Europe. As a former quite poor person, the fact that my skin is white, of course, and that I'm not from the inner city, didn't make food more available. Here's the thing. If you have an inner city neighborhood, where for 20 blocks in any direction, and the people that shop there, people tend to shop within their communities in cities because they tend to be heavily segregated. It's not like a rural area. This demographically, you can see it. If you look at a demographic map of any major U.S. city, there's a fairly stringent delineation between the races and different ethnicities, and certainly socioeconomic groups. If I'm going to start a grocery store in the middle of the hood, am I going to spend a lot of money on food that nobody is going to buy there? Because people from the wealthy suburbs, they're not going to come to the hood to buy their goat cheese salad. It's just not going to happen. Why the hell would I offer something that's not going to sell? It's just supply and demand. And if you're poor, you're in the hood, you're probably, if you're there, you're not going to buy the goat cheese salad because you don't have the money for it. And why the fuck would you want it in the first place? You want cheap food. You want cheap food. That's what you go for. People with low incomes don't have the leisure of shopping healthy. They have the leisure of shopping efficient. And unfortunately, what we've got right now is a situation where largely because of bureaucracy and regulations, cheap food from some mega corporation, often re-imported after being processed in the third world, shitty fried food, filled with MSG, filled with preservatives, genetic modified shit, stuff that's been in a can for 6 months, that's cheap. Stuff that's wholesome, even locally grown, that didn't have to get shipped through 3 countries in order to exist, not processed, technically speaking should be cheaper, costs you an arm and a leg. Go to the organic section. What do you find? Prices that are higher for something simply because of the 30 cents more for the can of peas for literally no reason other than a chemical has been left out of the can of peas. That's what you get. That's not food apartheid. This is the result of purely economic situations. What we need to understand, this is like the counterpart to this would be white privilege. White privilege does not exist. There are privileged white people. There are also privileged black people. The disparity that you see is due to communities that are highly segregated. Not by force. Nobody forced the black people to live among black people. White people must live here. This is the Polish neighborhood, and that's little Soho, and this is little Chinatown. Nobody did that. It's simply people tend to bond within those communities more regularly. Some of it's related to racial crime. A lot of it's related to job opportunities, linguistic barriers, things like that, especially among immigrant communities. But that's not the result of racism. It's the result of cold, hard, goddamn logic and economics. That's all. White privilege doesn't exist. If you're a poor white person living in rural Appalachia, you face similar situation to someone who's poor and black and living in the ghetto. They have there are definite similarities, and food availability is going to be one of them. The only difference I can conceive of is that outside of an urban setting, where land tends to be cheaper, if you're, out in the middle of the boondocks, you can probably grow some of your own food. That's wholesome. But I mean, you're not getting it at a grocery store. You have to go through the effort to grow it and can and all that stuff. You look at like hillbilly lifestyle. You get people with a dirt floor hut and shit like that, and yet they've got all sorts of food. They can meat and fucking make their own cheese and shit like that. It's kind of harder to do that in a city. The fact that racial minorities, and we're using that term in the loosest sense as possible these days, tend towards urban environments as opposed to more rural environments is partially by choice and cultural. It's partially because of the nature of immigration leading people into urban climes, typically people that are exodusing from a city. Yeah, there's going to be a disproportionate number of people from at this point, the middle and upper middle classes who are seeking to get away from urban government. There's a reason why people from urban California are choosing to go buy ranches in Texas right now. It's not due to racism. It's due to economics. It's due to far-left economics fucking things up specifically. Unfortunately, they go to Texas and they're fucking up the political system there to an extent. The same is true of Arizona and some of these other regions. That's the reality. There's no food apartheid. If anything, the easier way to state what she's talking about, and then the phenomenon is quite real, would be if you've got capitalism, there's no reason why, if you want to profit, why you're going to sell things that nobody's going to buy. That would be what a stupid centralized government would do. Ayanna Pressley would say, okay, I'm going to go into the ghetto and I'm going to build food co-ops, and then I'm going to force taxpayers from elsewhere to heavily subsidize them so they can operate. Also, the kind of places that are going to set up shop and sell the wholesome food, the organic, the seasoned tofu, and 10 types of sushi, and chai lattes, and all these other things, they tend to be more expensive to set up and to fund. If you go into the ghetto, what happens? You're going to get robbed. Nobody's going to start the hippie, trippy, love bead and meditation incense outlet in the ghetto. It's just not going to happen, because they'll end up with their business burned down and it'll get turned into a crack shack. It does not matter what demographics are there as far as race. It has very little to do with that. It's an urban culture thing. Anyway, it wouldn't make any fiscal sense. It's sort of like you wouldn't set up like the Whole Food hippie store out in the middle of nowhere in white West Virginia either. Who the fuck are you going to sell to? Nobody's going to buy that shit. All the wholesome greens and shit they grow in at home anyway. They're not going to buy your overpriced, hyped up crap. And by the way, there's nothing wrong, at least, short term when you're young and healthy, there's nothing wrong with eating junk food. There's nothing wrong with microwave burritos. If you're eating them every meal, it might be a problem. You know how you solve this? You give upward mobility to the lower classes in the city by removing regulations and getting rid of far leftism. That's literally what's causing their problem. Look, there's a lot of food scarcity in Venezuela too, and they've achieved literal socialism. There's a lot of food scarcity there, to the point where you might have to eat your pets. Thankfully, even if you're from the lower class, generally we didn't, eat our cats or anything. You can think about it once in a while, but, a cube steak might be more feasible. By the way, New Englanders should not cook steak, generally speaking. New Englanders are very good at certain kinds of food, but that's the other thing, is taste scarcity. I mean, there's no taste scarcity in food from the ghetto, that's for sure. But in New England, yeah, depending on the dish, it could be a little bit bland. We the other day, Liz cooked a chicken. It was so great, and I hyper seasoned it because it's sort of what I'm into. Oh my god, it was great. It should have taken a picture of it, but I think my phone wasn't set up yet. So yeah, my other phone broke and I had to get a new one. This time I said fuck it and I got the protective screen because I'm an idiot. So now hopefully it's as armored as a Nokia from the 90s. That's what I need. I don't know, I tend to be a little bit on the clumsy side, but I swear the screen cracked when it was just in my pocket. I didn't do anything to it. I didn't drop it. I didn't abuse it in any way, and the screen cracked. Thing's fucking flimsy as hell. Again, maybe they should make them a little bit more durable. Maybe that would make sense. Oh, right, then you would buy fewer phones and they would make less money. It is one blind spot of capitalism, I suppose, plans in essence. But no, food apartheid doesn't exist. It's a bunch of bullshit. And she's doing this to pander. You know, she's got a certain audience that she wants to pander to in order to sell more of her t-shirts or whatever. I know AOC is engaging in wanton capitalism at this point. I wonder how many six-figure sums she's made, by the way, off of her sweatshirts. I wonder how much goddamn money she's made. She's probably made, in the last couple weeks, she's probably made more than I do all year. Now, keeping that in mind, yeah, there's privilege. Politicians have a fucking goddamn lot of it. That's about all. Peace out.